feature or an extra layer of flexibility which will provide how you want to use that Soulbound token. It's not just only
the proofs are going to be on-chain or off-chain, right? And if you're thinking of blockchain, right, blockchain exists better for
whatever
long-term.
the transactions or any proofs or verifications can be tracked on-chain with the Soulbound
the online transactions, or you're able to ensure that any disclosures that are made on-chain to public, right? Like the Soulbound token itself is publicly available, but the transaction and the maybe at our peak, right, we're getting a few hundred transactions per month, right? But then we have an independent economic actors of these AI agents looking at hundreds of millions of new independent economic actors joining the system, right?
Interoperability. What do you think about the interoperability? How can we achieve or where we are in the ecosystem with respect to interoperability concept?
Advice, Joseph.
Blockchains will pay so much time for you, too much money for your time, right? If you're able to like not deploy like 1 and 2 AI agents on their chain, but like 1 million or 10 million, wow, you're gonna be their best friend.
Right. What is your generic advice for new developers which is entering in the ecosystem and who are trying to, because what in India specifically, I don't know about the globe, but here what is creating thought process is blockchain dead, or is it worth to invest more time or more money into the blockchain space?
If you're a programmer, you can do a lot better by using an AI generating programming tool to check your your code generation, to review your code, audio code, etc.
Hey, hi everyone. So today we have a very special guest, Joseph. Hi, Joseph. So here we have Joseph, which is from long time into the AI and blockchain. So he is leading at strategic initiatives in the SingularityNET. So over to you, Joseph, for the introduction and more about your background.
Great, so it's amazing to be here. So yes, I started back in 2012 with my family repurposing old game computers with GTX 680s. We repurposed those to mine a range of things from Bitcoin, then later Litecoin, Zcash, Monero, a few others. Maybe not the GTX 680 itself. However, getting started, it was just like the super early days. You pretty much were using it to purchase for some microtransactions online. You were validating the network, and you were participating on forums. That was mainly my main contribution to blockchain for a long time. We got really deep into Ethereum, so mining Ether back in the early days, which was really exciting because Ether was like this token where you could have this like huge lead time for creating smart contracts. This idea that hasn't really been explored since Nick Szabo put it out in the early 90s. And now we're thinking about, okay, we have these autonomous transactions and these contracts where you can have like limitless execution. And with those, we kind of saw as a family, okay, cool, they should probably put a lot more services and stuff, becoming a much larger miner and validator at the time. And so I think at that peak we had like 30 to 40 GTX 1070 Ti's, and that was at the peak of late 2017, early 2018, if I remember correctly. But we left that because we realized that Ethereum has huge promise of also being like ASIC proof, right? Application-specific integrated circuits, and where Bitcoin was like, you could mine with your CPU, and then you had to mine with the GPU, and then ASICs became the main way. And we still have a few of the old like USBs. If you remember back in the day, the first ASICs were like this tiny little USB you'd plug into the side of your computer. And we had like this whole like rig where it was just like racked up with these little USBs. But with Ethereum, it wanted to have this like ASIC proof means of consensus. And so that wasn't lived up to in the end. And then ASIC started rolling out to the market, and then our 1070s became pretty redundant really quickly. We've now like recently repurposed those to make some like AI servers back at home. But that was kind of like the end of the beginning of my first blockchain. And then after working with a few ultra high net worths, tipping my hat into a few startups and ventures, I found my way into one of the largest identity firms in Australia, which is Frankie One.
Okay.
And for myself, I was a crypto specialist. So I led a lot of crypto vertical, which meant that I spoke to most of the top 10 crypto exchanges, if not all of them, including FTX, which I can name publicly. There's a few others, obviously, I can't name publicly because they're still live and ongoing deals. But I had an amazing time there. And it really actually triggered the interest of mine to go deeper into identity, because I realized that with blockchain, it was this huge, like, hyper-financialized market where you could have, like, transactions, you had to stake transactions, you had to, put collateral up, but you couldn't actually borrow the full amount. You had to borrow, like, 70% LVR, not the full amount of the collateral, or even like leverage even further without too much risk. And so I started playing around with a few concepts. And around that time, that's when the Soulbound Token idea came out from Iglan Whale, Vatak Buterin, and Pooja Olhaver in the Finding Web3 Souls white paper, which they introduced a whole new idea of like this decentralized economy powered by Soulbound tokens. And then I soon, about a year later, published my first research paper with a co-author from UC Berkeley, who's now the head of the deputy head of crypto assets in the Japanese Financial Services Authority, which is the SEC equivalent in Japan. And we published this paper looking at how Soulbound tokens could be this new primitive to like avert a lot of the hyperfinancialization within Web3. Because again, if like we have an entire system based on money, plutocracy will rule. So went deeper into that, had a consultancy with my amazing co-founder, Mitchell Travers, called Solvis, ironically. And we worked on a bunch of Soulbound token related use cases, but we were way too early. Like, only now am I seeing the real like uptake of Soulbound tokens with the likes of, Animoca Brands, Open Campus, OCID to attest the use education credentials, and also Galaxy's, which is spelled GALAXE, their credential, which uses Soulbound tokens to pretty much learn and train from your on-chain reputation, and it's stored in this one Soulbound token. So Soulbound tokens are definitely having an amazing high now, but back then when we started consultancy, we were way too early. But we got to work on some pretty cool projects. And that led to me in the end moving on from there to work at SingularityNET, which I've been here for nearly a year and a half. And I'm part of the Strategic Initiatives Office. So we work on a range of amazing and cool ideas, from working on translations with one of the biggest Chinese novelists in the world, through to looking at bridges and staking mechanisms, and how do we control like circulating supply, through how do we embed like AI reputation systems with governance mechanisms, how do we look at, you name it, we're trying to do it. And especially obviously SingularityNET pushing forward with AGI frameworks, which is our peak framework, which is open called Hyperon, which worked by Dr. Ben Goertzel, who actually coined the term AGI back in the early thousands, funny enough. And that's what we've been working on ever since. But my career is littered with some pretty cool times, traveling the world, going to a lot of conferences, speaking at plenty of others, writing research papers, working on identity solutions, working in DeFi, and really kind of getting the whole entire swath of what is the industry. And I have to say, it's probably the best industry you can work in. So that's kind of my background, but I absolutely love it, and I'm grateful to be in this industry.
Amazing, Joseph. You have given your complete intro, a very amazing one. But and I'm sure you have a very rich and great background of whatever you have worked, especially with your special research with the Soulbound tokens, and I think you have mentioned CBDC part as well somewhere, right? So you have done a lot of work in that space, and whatever you are doing now, that's completely amazing. So now we have a lot of multiple topics to talk in our podcast, right? So let me start with this. So you started very early. I think you mentioned 2012 from you started. So
Yeah, that's right.
right. So at that time, the blockchain or Bitcoin was not in that much safe. Like it was like very fluctuation stuff. So things, what is that internal institute which is feel like, yeah, this is the thing what I want to do, and this is a tech, and this could be our future leading tech. What was your thought process at that time when you get into this Bitcoin stuff, other than mining part, that what you already mentioned?
Yeah, like I didn't actually believe in it for a long time. Funny enough, it was kind of weird because I got into it because of family, and my
Oh.
dad, my brother, myself, we really enjoyed it. It was just like a magical money. It didn't make much sense to me. I was quite young at the time too, and I remember I was kind of even when I started like advising on it to a few like family offices and high net worth individuals, and even just friends and family who were just curious about like what Bitcoin, what private keys are, what does it mean to have a wallet. Obviously I could never answer like should they invest in this or not, because it was just completely outside my remit, but I could kind of explain the technology and why it might be a good idea to look at it further from a capital perspective. But I didn't actually believe in it for a long time. I was like, it's magical internet money. It's super simple. If you look at the white paper, it's like 9 pages long, and like both the first page and last page are just super like references and then like a front matter, and that's it. So you really have 7 pages of working with. So is this really going to change the entire financial system? I'm like, probably not. However, what it did is it started a very large conversation. And in this conversation, it started became this huge market of now that's worth what, like $3 trillion, $2.5 trillion. I don't even know what today's market cap is. And it's provided me an amazing profession and industry that I love and I'm so dear for. So in the early days, like it just wasn't, it was just kind of like magical internet money, and people were doing cool things, and you kind of had two major groups, right? You had like your like super nerds, right? Who were like, this is so cool, we can like trade money, and we can, like maybe 3 groups, like trade money and have fun, right? Then you had like the the people who want to be anonymous and those who are using for listed purposes. And then you have the third, which are like the super privacy maxis. And then in the middle, like none of them were actually satisfied, because on the developer side and on the nerd side, it wasn't that intuitive. It was just kind of like super simple. Like there was some upgrades that would happen every once in a while, but there was few limitations, like block space, and the size of the blocks was only like 1 megabyte, and those limitations were pretty set. And then once Satoshi left the scene, it became hard to really rationalize like what's happening. And so there was obviously a lot of spin-offs. We had XRP coming a few years later. We had Ethereum coming a few years later. We had the first like notion of the Web3, which came from the Web3 Foundation, started by Polkadot founder. His name passes me. I'm so sorry. But this is the beginning of the industry where people started realizing, okay, great, this could actually be a new layer of transferring information. And I think that's the main kind of point that people should think about when it comes to the value of Bitcoin early on. I still obviously hold a lot of Bitcoin. I still love Bitcoin quite a lot. However, it started a conversation and it kind of allowed other networks to be spun out of that. Some have failed, some have really succeeded. XRP obviously is doing very well, and honestly, in my personal opinion, I'm very surprised by it. However, it's amazing to see exactly how we've taken this like really degen idea to like now being institutional. So that was the first developers, right? And then you have like the users of for listed purposes. They're most but gone right now. I remember I was in a conference a few years ago where someone said like it was like a Web3 conference in Australia, a blockchain conference in Australia with a lot of institutional players, and someone said, who was, I think it was a regulator or a banker, and they said like, well, 30% or 25% or 30% of all money laundering still happens through crypto. And the response from the panelists was, oh, you're saying 70% of all money laundering comes from traditional finance? And it's kind of funny because really is like it was a great way to for people to money launder back then, but now it's much harder with some amazing tools, amazing companies who've raised lots of money, made lots of money from just going out to market and finding their product market fit with these amazing intelligence tools. And then for the last, which is the privacy maxi, it wasn't enough for them either. Like you really think about Bitcoin's not enough for privacy maxi. The Monero came around. The Monero had issues with being readily acceptable by different exchanges, because exchanges realized that they were like a black box, and it was worryful that some people were trading Monero and equally being paid in Monero and then exiting out, and they couldn't really determine exactly where the money was going to. So it wasn't really enough either for that. But as well, like for every kind of major profile that came into interest of Bitcoin, it led to another interest, which was another piece of technology. And then people voted with their feet. They put their money exactly where they were interested in. And then we could see that go out. So the developers got Ethereum. Monero was a solution for a lot of the privacy maxis, but even then, like you have Zcash and etc. And for illicit users, they've kind of all but left the industry to most of the degree. Like obviously, you can never really get rid of all illicit actors because they'll always try to be there. Like Lazarus Group is pretty open on crypto. We all know their wallet. We all know exactly who they're transacting with. We all identify their crypto, but they still exist there. But it's just less prevalent than it was back in the days. But most of the time, the forums were just littered of just super nerdy people who are like passing ideas and realizing how do I make private keys, or what's the best way to make entropy, or etc. So like blockchain has really evolved over the last 12 years now, 12, 13 years, and the industry has become far more professional, and it's gone through some really great times and some really low times too.
Amazing. Yeah. True, it's true. Like industry evolved very.
Gavin Woods, by the way, Polkadot founder. Gavin Woods, Web3 Foundation. Web3, the only reason why Web3 exists is because of Gavin Woods making Web3 Foundation back in, I think, 2014.
Amazing. Yeah, that's true. So you have mentioned it right. So Web3 ecosystem evolved way faster, or way beyond what people imagine, I think, and there is an amazing future great ahead as well. So now I would like to ask you about the Soulbound tokens. What you have your intensive research lied into it, right? So would you like to help my audience to first explain what is Soulbound token, and then what are the real use cases of it in the blockchain ecosystem or in the world?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll try to do my best over it. I wrote the paper. We finished the paper, I think, back in February of 2023. So it's now like 2 years on now. But essentially, this idea of a Soulbound token, like you have two major like values in the world, right? You have like capital value, which is like your dollars, your monetary value, etc. And then you have your reputation value. Like for instance, like Akshay, like you and I here, like you didn't pay me money to be here, I didn't pay any money to be here, right? We had like a mutual friend that introduced us, but there's some kind of value there, right? Because if he didn't put down his value to say Joseph is a viable individual, then how would you know if I'm worth interviewing in the first place? So some value was exchanged. We never signed any contract. We never signed any invoice, but value was staked, value was exchanged, and now here we are right now. And that's how a lot of the traditional system works, right? When people get jobs, a lot of them stake value. Like when you apply for a job, you're not putting down any money, but you're putting your reputation on the line, right? You have references on there. You have your history, your experiences, your credibility, intellectual value behind there. And with Soulbound Tokens, it's meant to add that whole new dimension to blockchain, because blockchain cannot continue in a way where we continue to have capital value running everything, right? Because when power begets more power, which means your token begets more power, then you have this really challenging situation in the future where you have like a very high Gini coefficient for certain ecosystems, right? And the Gini coefficient determines the inequity between holding the centers of value, you could say. There's probably better definitions out there, but ballparking it right now. But essentially, in the current world, I think the highest Gini coefficient in the world we have is 0.45 or 65. I need to get the exact number. And in South Africa, right, where it has the highest concentration of wealth in comparison to the rest of the population. And if you look at like Lido Finance, it actually has a Gini coefficient of 0.63 or 0.95. I can't remember the exact number, but it was extremely high, much higher than in the traditional sense. And there was an amazing protocol way back when called DAO Right. So DAO Right. And it was an amazing protocol that actually evaluated the equity of each of the different protocols. And you would see very clearly that most ecosystems were actually heavily lent towards the holders of the crypto, of the token itself, which means that you have a complete disparity in people who want to hold value, new entrants into the ecosystem, right? People who actually want to vote on new proposals, right? Even the fact that most of the times you enter a new ecosystem, you couldn't actually vote fairly, because it didn't matter if you voted, because essentially the top 10% already decided. And Soulbound Tokens could have added, and still has the potential to add, a significant amount of value with adding a new layer of value, irrespective of capital value. And for Soulbound Tokens, it was introduced as an idea in a blog by Vitalik back in, I'm pretty sure it was January 26th or January 27th of 2022. And then it was followed on by a white paper with Elon Whale from Microsoft Research. Pooja Olhaver, who was like a strategy lead at Flashbots, and Vitalik Buterin, again, obviously founder of Ethereum. And that white paper came out in I think it was May 10th or May 11th of 2022. And I saw this and I was so surprised, because by that point I'm like, wow, people were actually really considering the detriment of what hyper-financialization of Web3 looks like. And so they brought forward two major concepts. So there was the Soul. The Soul was this new wallet primitive that was meant to hold attestations and reputation value associated to an individual. It could be your education, it could be your on-chain activity, it could be your references in your job, it could be, you name it, something that's going to be holding some reputation value that is non-capital based. And then there was a Soulbound token. And so the Soul was meant to hold these Soulbound tokens. And obviously the concept, for those who play World of Warcraft and other massively online multiplayer MMOs, they had these weapons or gear that had a Soulbound token where they couldn't sell in the auction house, and they could only sell it to a vendor. So it was non-transferable. And I think a lot of crypto, because it's transferable, it kind of has some inherent value where people can derive from it, right? NFTs are a great example of a failed market within crypto, where people are still trying to get their holdings back for NFTs, but they realized that there was no value. There was no value in NFTs, because it was so much that was created. It became so much of a bubble that people realized they had to exit out of it, and there was just nothing left. Whereas Soulbound Tokens is abstracting away from value. So the four major aspects of Soulbound Token is that it's non-transferable, and this is for proto SBT: non-transferable, revocable, issuer arbitrated, and publicly visible. And in line is non-transferable, publicly visible, revocable, and issuer arbitrated. And when we think about issuer arbitrated, and that was actually a new piece of information we put out in our research paper on Soulbound Tokens after Vitalik and team, because when it says revocable, it means that someone has to be able to take it back at some point. But it wasn't really kind of helpful for the case of Web3, because in the future it should be recoverable, right? Revocable means you can lose it, but recoverable means that you can also lose it, but then you can gain it back. And I think that's one of the big problems with blockchain right now, because of the layers of technology and security limitations, where if you lose something, you lose it forever, and that's it. And there's not very much ways to backpedal. But with Soulbound Tokens, we're bringing this new method to recover, but first you have to revoke. And so I think a lot of people who had this idea of Soulbound tokens, they read like the whole entire paper, but on like I think the third or fourth page, there's a little footnote with like a few words, and on the footnote it says like this is like an early design. This is not meant to be like a proper production grade token. But people never read that like one footnote, and so they assumed, oh, it was always going to be revocable. There's never privacy preserved. That's it. And so we go down the route of like non-transferability makes sense. Like you can't transfer reputation value to another person, right? But you should be able to recover it if you have to. Publicly visible is and people have to be able to disclose it and see it. And then the last right, like the issue arbitration, the one we added on the end of it is like, well, whoever issues a token, might be an authority, might be yourself, might be by peers, they should also have the right to revoke it too, if in the case. But again, we wanted to have like a pathway to the future where the life cycle doesn't include revocation, but includes recoverability. So that's kind of the idea of this of Soulbound tokens. But again, like to make this like really heavy, multi-layered, multi-dimensional economy requires social capital to be involved, and without that, you have this economy ran by the people that have nots. And I think that if you're going to be looking at decentralized economies, as it gets bigger and more value is pumped into it, for any what reason, there needs to be a way for new players to join in and feel fairly valued in that system and provide that value that may not be capital based, maybe intellectually based, maybe doing bug bounties, might be creating new code, might be creating new documentation, might be contributing to a GitHub repo. It could be setting up new proposals. But then how do they get seen when their token is not valued enough? So that Soulbound token could be a method of showing that. And we did a lot of work around that. And I went to University of British Columbia to speak about the idea to a few people from a few governments, which was very exciting, and I really enjoyed that. It was a great time.
Amazing. So amazing, the concept, the soulbound concept, and the study. It's not binding with any asset directly. It's but the value, and which is non-transferable, which is tied that value with that particular individual. So which can be revoked when the value of that asset or the purpose of that token get completed. We can revoke it or we can recover that token as well after a time.
Potentially, yes. Yeah, I think the main way to think about it is like Soulbound tokens, because once SBTs came out, like the identity space is super vicious. Right. If no one has ever been in a conversation, like a working group with people who are identity experts, they all hate each other. Well, they all love each other, but they all hate each other because it's like, no, SSI is the way, no, DID's the way, no, VC's the way, and someone like, no, DID and VC, and then some said a non-credit approach, and then it gets like really confusing. But the reality is, Soulbound Token, and when Soulbound Token joined the conversation, like, no, we've been here for 20 years. How dare you try to take the show of identity? And what I put forward when I was in these conversations was like, well, no, we don't care. Like, do what you want to do. We're just a vehicle. Because with blockchain is an immune system. Anything that's not natively born into blockchain is seen as a threat or can't be introduced into it, right? That's why we have to have like the use of oracles and like the derivative tokens we can have like from bridging mechanisms. But like Soulbound tokens were never meant to be a competitor to SSI or DID or any other kind of frameworks. It was actually meant to be a vehicle for them to exist within blockchain natively, because you do not exist natively in blockchain. And a verified credential shouldn't necessarily have a transferability nature to it, right? It should be publicly visible too, to an extent, like with some privacy preservation controls. Whoever issues it should also have some level of control over it, right? So it's like,
right.
So you can see that Soulbound tokens are just meant to be a vehicle to allow these other amazing frameworks and innovation to exist within blockchain, which again is that immune system.
So now from this conversation, I just have little doubt sort of thing. How can soulbound can go hand in hand together with SSI or any other concept? Like, is it alternative solutions for either use SSI or use soulbound, or if we can use any particular business person can use both the concepts together? How is it?
Both concepts together. It's just all Soulbound tokens are a simple token primitive. And right now, like I remember actually back in 2023, when we did the research around different like EIP, ERCs that were on the Ethereum, like requested comments, there was around 15 or 16 Soulbound token related EIP, ERCs. And a lot of them were finding ways to make it more customizable or at least a better vehicle for like using a verified credential, a DID or SSI, right? And a lot of these are like principles in nature, right? They have to reach a certain number of criteria to be considered one of these, right? Obviously, some have technological frameworks, some others who don't. And people need to believe that, let's say, for instance, a decentralized identifier, for instance, could be stored on a Soulbound token as an idea. Like the DID itself, right? Of, having a decentralized identifier, having that proof, right? Using some kind of FHE compute, you could be able to create a DID that is Soulbound token native. But it's like you think about the framework of Soulbound token. It's publicly visible, non-transferable, revocable, issuable, arbitrator, right? And then think to yourself, okay, well, what kind of frameworks work well with this? But it's not meant to compete. It's a vehicle to allow those interact more appropriately on chain, or we have to use off-chain proofs, or we have to use other means that may deprecate over time. So it's like, think of the beauty of blockchain. How do we keep it native to blockchain? And I think Soulbound tokens was, and still is, meant to be that way forward. However, the industry has progressed a lot faster than I've actually kept up with it. Some of which is like the Binance account bound token. So back in, it would have been in 2022 or so, Binance released like the first institutional grade Soulbound token, which is the account bound token, which is more of a centralized version of a Soulbound token. And this BABT, it issued around 700,000 of these, and it pretty much represented a proof on the BNB chain, on Buildaville chain, that represented KYC proof, right? It doesn't have any KYC data in there, but it said like, hey, this account is associated to an account that we have KYC, and we can prove to you that this is all KYC, and then it can interact with regulated services that are directly issued on and deployed on BNB. That was one of the easiest use cases. But the first use case ever of Soulbound token was actually for gambling. It was actually for I think it was the Bored Apes Club. We were using it for raffling. I think it was the first use case we found on chain of a Soulbound token, and beyond that, I think it's now exploded to dozens and dozens and dozens of use cases, from again OCID on Animoca brands, Open Campus Layer 3, or the Galaxy's on-chain reputation storing device, which is Soulbound token based. But again, it was never meant to compete against any of these. It was meant to just be another token value that was able to assist when it came to that storage in that vehicle.
Okay, got it. So it's nothing to do with the concept of SS or something like that, but it's a new feature or an extra layer of flexibility which will provide how you want to use that Soulbound token. It's not just only
on chain, yes.
Yeah, but it will feel more native to on chain. Whatever stuff you are doing, it will be resides on chain. So whatever metadata you want to publish, so just simply convert it as Soulbound, and it will be there on chain. You can verify on chain is the with respect to the proofs or
more or less, right? It's either the proofs are going to be on chain or off chain, right? And if you're thinking of blockchain, right, blockchain exists better for the long term if it's going to be on chain. It will exist much better because it needs to be natively born to really interact with each other.
Correct. Okay, now I understood. Because ideally, in let's say the DID concept or SSI, we create the VC to generate the verifiable claims for that, and then that VC we won't store on chain. We store in the wallet, right, on user wallet. So the transaction, whatever happening with respect to VC, we cannot track it. But here, whatever the transactions or any proofs or verifications can be tracked on chain with the Soulbound tokens. So I think
to a degree, privacy, the two major innovations that we didn't have back in 2023 was around privacy preservation technologies. So ways that you can preserve the underlying transactions, or you're able to ensure that any disclosures that are made on chain aren't too public, right? Like the Soulbound token itself is publicly available, but the transaction and the transfer information is not publicly available, right? So there's a need to know my birth date, where I live, my even potentially my token holdings to a degree, right, across different wallets. That was more possible with having a Soulbound token, but it needed privacy preservation technologies. And the second element of innovation that needed to happen around Soulbound tokens was around your recoverability, as I mentioned before.
Yeah.
And so we had different ways that we've kind of proposed in our paper, which I'll provide you a link to later on, around how we could achieve this innovation without having to recover and to avoid revocation long term.
Okay, amazing. So now, we got the clear idea and the concept of Soulbound tokens. I think nowadays, so can you please throw light on the adaptability of the Soulbound tokens, how widely it's adopted in the ecosystems, and how many use cases are around it? So as you mentioned, but I want to know it in a better way.
It's a great question. I wish I had more stats to you right now, but like back in so the concept came out in January 2022. By the end of 2022, we already had Binance doing the first major use case of that, which was the Binance Account-Bound Token, and they published a pretty lengthy paper around Soulbound Tokens, which is amazing. The fact that Binance Research puts time and effort into that. There was already 3 other peer-reviewed research papers. Ours was peer-reviewed by. We had peer reviews from Yale, Waseda University, Amazon, AWS, Verida, and a few other I think we had 20 contributions in total. And then again, my co-author was from UC Berkeley, and now she's like the deputy director of crypto assets at the Japanese government, which is the SEC. So there was a lot of interest, and even I had some conversations with I can't say which. What I had some conversations with 3 different central banks around how Soulbound tokens could be used with central bank digital currencies. However, those conversations didn't progress beyond the variables. And so where is it at right now? Like considering a institution like a central bank is interested to see Soulbound tokens. We already had Binance the first few months of its idea, spent off a white paper. They made their first use case right. Now we have Animoca Brands, one of the largest Web3 organizations in the world, with the Education L3 based on Arbitrum. Open Campus has an OCID which accesses around 20 million students globally. It's pretty amazing. But I wish I had more stats to you. Again, I'm just trying to say, even 2 years ago, where we were at, we had 15 EIP ERCs out. We had dozens of organizations already. We had governments who were interested too. It was even, I think our paper was used by the Japanese Digital Agency, which is a civic innovations arm of the Japanese government, as part of their digital policy. So, I would love to see a larger update. I've been a bit far from the Soulbound token industry for the last year or two because of being so deep into artificial intelligence and blockchain governance. However, if we're that far on, and even at ETH Denver, there was a few taglines and interest around Soulbound token still. So I don't think it's dead. It just doesn't make as much money. It's much sexier to sell ICOs, IEOs, right? Capital, reserve tokens, right? But having it's socially reserved, there's not much money in that, so it's not as sexy to other people. But the people who are pioneering that are finding the commercial models, which is the most exciting part, the commercializing, the social identities that we have.
Okay, got it. So you just touch base on your current stuff, you're more into the governance and blockchain governance and CBDC concepts also you're exploring. So what exactly you are exploring on that part, and what is this concept of CBDC? Can you please help us to understand it?
So with central bank digital currency is a really controversial topic.
Okay.
And I think that simply these conversations are going to happen no matter what. Central bank digital currencies are so let's say for instance fiat for the most part is not reserved by any asset. The reserve of the current the US dollar, for instance, is perpetuated by the value of the society itself, right? If the society fails, the dollar fails, right? The dollar fails, the society fails, right? It's not hey, I'm reserved by gold, therefore I can buy and sell gold externally, right? Obviously we have exports, imports, we have your settlement layer, which some people joke about being the military, for instance. So there are values there that perpetuate, but again, if the society fails, the dollar will fail, right? And people can say, what about Bitcoin? But Bitcoin fails, it kind of all fails together, and then crypto will fail together. But with CBDCs, it's just kind of a digital proof, right? Because you look at, the US dollar, it's actually just, the value it may be represented digitally, but it's also represented by printed, notes. So with a central bank digital currency, it just kind of makes it a little bit smarter by, instead of printing cotton and stamping cotton with these new with new designs or whatever, or with a number or a code or whatever, you have a not on chain, but because most of these governments are agnostic to CBDCs and the technology underlying it, but you would have some digital proof of currency. So back at Soulbiz, we worked on the Australian CBDC pilot. So we were selected out of 163 companies. So our client was Zepto, which is one of the largest payment providers in Australia, to create a pilot project around central bank digital currencies. I think we created around 20 different pilot cases, and then we put forward 2. Now I can't say exactly where all that went, but we did get quite tapped into what CBDCs would look like under using blockchain. But again, most governments around the world are technology agnostic. So it was kind of weird when you're in conversations and you're listening to the CTO of the project, and they're like, oh yeah, it'll work, but we may not use blockchain. I'm like, then why are we talking? because like blockchain is meant to be this immutable layer where you can have like finality and you can just securely understand exactly where like who owns what. But the conversation has evolved over and over again, and maybe I don't want to go too much into CBDCs because CBDCs again it's a dirty concept, but I think that like in the end I would rather be in those conversations rather than a person who's like some investment banker who doesn't care about decentralized values, doesn't care about blockchain, doesn't care about what it means to be part of this industry in the first place. And so I think people who are going to abstract themselves away and run away from CBDCs, they're the reason why it can go worse because they're not in those conversations when they should be. And so I think it's important to be part of that. And there's a lot of CBDC work going on right now. However, it's very much on the back end, especially as like the U.S. now has with Trump going on. He will not be pursuing a CBDC whatsoever. CBDC will not exist under Trump. However, we have other digital proofs, like through like the Bit21 Act and a few other pieces of legislation that will be coming out around stablecoins. And stablecoins will have like this unique pseudo CBDC look to it. And hopefully we'll see like one or two stablecoin companies that will be onboarded as like will be onboarded directly with the Federal Reserve. But who knows? We'll find out like in the coming months.
Okay. So let's see how this will go in future. We have to just keep observing things with the government, but it's more into the government stuff. What they are trying to give the digital proof there to native currencies, right? Because in India, it's actively they are pitching this technology and they are trying to collaborate with the other countries as
digital INR and stuff. Yeah,
with respect to CBDC. So yeah.
I think people, again, what I should say is like, because I've been in blockchain for a long time, I've been in Bitcoin for a long time, I've been in AI now for a good amount of time, I've been in CBDCs a long time, right? And it's just so funny. It's hilarious because it's the same doomsayers when like blockchain was becoming big and Bitcoin was big, and one of the first kind of like comments was like, oh my gosh, Satoshi's gonna be the biggest rug pull ever, and then obviously that never happened. And then we had like XRP is gonna get a moon, but there are always institutions getting into it and they're gonna take over, and it's like it's still there, it's doing pretty well. And then we have like CBDCs, like oh no, like what if CBDCs come out there, and then AI, it's like oh my god, what if AI goes? There's always gonna be something wrong. They can't complain about, right? People are always gonna be scared about something, and I think people need to be scared less by this technology. And then be involved in the conversation because you only get scared when they're not involved. If you're not like a decentralized person that wants to protect their values, or privacy person wants to protect your identity, you're not in the conversation. Someone else who doesn't care about those values will be in there instead. And I think that people need to be really, really conscious about like, okay, if you're scared about something, change something. And with CBDCs, like trust me, like money needs an upgrade. Money needs a really, really big upgrade. And I don't think that an entire economy is going to be adopting Bitcoin in the next 15 years as an entire like legal tender. There's too many challenges around that. Even Ether, even USDC, because then USDC is then based on like multiple banks in the US and like a bunch of different assets, right? Not USDT because we can't find the order documents correctly. So what do we have anyways? And I think that people need to be serious about it and think like this is not really a game. Like all these things need upgrade in terms of technology and innovation, right? And like CBDCs is the natural next step. When it came to that, it's just like post COVID days when people were getting their bank account locked out. It's scary, but again, like people then realize like, wow, if they can do it with my bank, what they're gonna do with my CBDC in the future? They're gonna lock what kind of things I can buy? I can't buy baby formula anymore. It's like, wait a second. Like, if you're already telling me that they can lock your bank account, like, what's it going to be any different from now until the future? Like, if we're going to have better payment rails and like T+0 transactions and smart contracts that are going to like rule the world, like it's better. So I just want to say that because like people should relax because it's just ludicrous technology and you have to be calm about what's going to be wrong in their life.
True. Just as of now, relax and watch, and once the things get mature, it will be ease for everyone. It's not like
and join the conversation. If you're really scared about something, join the conversation.
Join developer is very important. The proper education and the awareness of the tech is very, very important. You just need to get scared about anything new. Just understand it and just observe what exactly happening. Amazing. Yeah. So now let's move towards the last topic sort of thing, like AI plus blockchain. So you are heavily walking into it, right? So what is going on in AI? So of course I know that it's damn thing very crazy.
So much is happening in AI.
Yeah.
I think one of the ways I want to propose this is that, and I'm a big believer in this, is that if blockchain didn't exist right first, obviously like AI has existed far before blockchain did. People forget about that. But when you think about like AI to the extent it is right now, if blockchain didn't exist to the extent it is right now, and AI existed first, right, to the extent it is right now, and then blockchain exists later, I truly do believe that these two technologies are completely symbiotic, and that if blockchain didn't exist before AI, that blockchain would exist because AI requires the payment rails, right? There is no chance that I can see in the future, right, where you have all these AI agents, right, operating online to the full extent they probably can actually hit a complete financial autonomy, open access to data and services, right, and like trustless execution without blockchain. It's impossible. Like, will it be trading like the credits you have on your Microsoft account or whatever, right? Will it be what will we be using, right? Like, blockchain provides this amazing transaction layer for artificial intelligence, especially AI agents, right? And then swarms of AI agents, then AI agent guilds and economies and microeconomies. If you have this one translation AI agent, right, and with like one I'm working on right now, then you may have to have like a blue benchmark AI agent behind that's like doing the accuracy benchmarking and then providing that data back, right? But then you want to run it autonomously, so then it needs to connect with a compute agent, right, which can buy and sell compute. And then you might want to have an ability to train your model, so then it goes to like a training model AI agent, right? And then you start to see that this one AI agent that you've also translate something has now been able to go forward and create a microeconomy and make you potentially money by translating, improving its own services. And really, like, AI and blockchain is a completely symbiotic relationship. And I think that people who are working AI and blockchain should be excited, because you are in the best place you could be. You're working two amazing pieces of technology that need each other to really exist.
Correct. Absolutely. Because with AI you can create a multiple automation and innovations, but with blockchain you can bring the trust and the transparency in the ecosystem. You can trust
Exactly.
whatever the execution is happening in the ecosystem. So amazing,
It's a
amazing.
very simplifiable, right? Like, you have blockchain providing capabilities to AI agents, right? And the AI agents provide activity.
Hmm.
Like, one of the things that people forget about the last 10 years of blockchain is we had like this boom of L1s,
Hmm.
and then we had the kind of the fight between the monolithics versus the modulars, right? And then after the monolithics and modulars had their argument, then we started seeing L2s who were really bullish on the modular approach, right? So they became the scalability layer, allowed L1s to work on security and decentralization, and the L2s were working on obviously security and decentralization, but then with a prime focus on your scalability. But now what happened? Like, they raised a lot of money. They have a lot of amazing node operators on there. A lot of people have committed a lot of time, like retroactively as well. But then we have too much block space. Like, TPS back then was like table stakes. Like, TPS back then was innovation, but now it's table stakes. So we have all this block space, right, where you go to some of these chains and you see these new blocks being created every single day, every single day, empty blocks.
Empty blocks can.
So what do you fill these with, right? AI agents. Like, AI agents, right, are independent economic actors. Right now, you and me, Akshay, we are two independent economic actors that operate on a few different blockchains, right? We commit transactions occasionally, right? Not to a high frequency rate, but we manage our money. We trade. We're in Aave a little bit. We're making DAO. We're in Curve Finance, setting up stablecoin pools. We're having fun. But then that's it. Like, you and I might commit a few, maybe at our peak, right? We're committing a few hundred transactions per month, right? But then we have an independent economic actors of these AI agents looking at hundreds of millions of new independent economic actors joining the system, right? Creating hundreds of millions of billions of new transactions every single month, right? It is an amazing benefit that blockchain has been waiting for. Blockchain is the best use case for AI agents, and AI agents love blockchain.
Love blockchain.
And so that's why, like, in Denver, if you went to all like the near L1s, near protocols conversation, or you look at any of the dialogue around Ethereum, right? If you had a drinking game around AI agents, and every time people said AI agents in Denver, you'd be wasted, absolutely wasted, because the AI agents was the biggest narrative. But L1s and L2s are so interested in AI agents because they're like, oh my gosh, we can actually make these massively, like, these independent actors to drive activity on chain, activity that humans cannot do,
Correct.
because it's just not enough, and to fill that block space.
Yeah, but what I feel sometimes, yeah, of course, what you mentioned is completely right. But let's say there is a use case. We have two different chains, and they want to communicate somehow. The problem of interoperability. What do you think about the interoperability? How can we achieve or where we are in the ecosystem with respect to interoperability concept?
Oh, there's so many use cases now. Like,
Yeah.
like that was meant to be the layer 3, right? Like, people, like, it's kind of like Venice in a way. Like, your L1s were your foundations, then your L2 your buildings, and your L3 were your bridges. Between these 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 buildings, right? This Venice concept of blockchain. And where are we at in interoperability? Like, it's still happening. Like, the reality is that bridges are fairly cheap. Some of them are a bit more expensive. It's quite easy, but then again, bridges are a bootstrap, like a rickshaw version of what interoperability looks like. And I think that like with what Uniswap is doing with like with Uni, like Uni layer, it's pretty interesting. Ag layer as well with Polygon, like CCIP, with Chainlink. Like there is a lot of innovation around that, but I think that like a lot of these systems are already so heavy and big, and they already have like the derivative tokens, like the versions of the tokens that you may want to trade or buy or sell into. So really, like, what do you really need interoperability with? Probably accessing different types of like unique kind of developer environments that it might be on one chain to another, right? That afforded by the programming language that you use. Maybe it's going to be about some data sources they have access to. But the reality is like we already have a degree of interoperability where I'm already pretty calm with, right? Like the most I have to do is like maybe bridge assets off of like, Polygon to Arbitrum, and that's kind of it. Like I don't really mind that. But then as well, we always have like amazing chain abstracted tools, and yeah, I'm not too fussed by it, actually. I'll be honest. Like I was fussed a few years ago, but I think we have a great technology to say that the innovation is happening in the right direction, and I think that it will happen in its right time. But again, like it's the problem is like where the liquidity is, and that's where people want to be. I think maybe one of the best pieces of technology we have out there is maybe Immutable X. Immutable X has like a way where liquidity is already synchronized across the entire layer, which doesn't seem too complicated, but they achieved it in a use case of gaming, which was very difficult to do in the first place. But I think like Ag layer again, like Uni. CCIP will be ways we see great innovation come out of this.
Amazing. Okay, got it. So I have one more question. What do you think, like what next trends or what ongoing trends are coming on blockchain ecosystem, which developers should focus on, or the businesses can build more business on top? What's your advice on the like ongoing trends or which is future coming trends? Yeah.
Like I think AI agents, like everyone says AI agents, but like when AI agents like start deploying a lot of different things, start testing, experimenting how AI agents can interact with each other, because the first organization that's able to create like inter-AI agent relationships, right? So like my AI agents able to talk to AI agents, right? So this might be like trust registries, it might be like issuing a new decentralized identifier to each of these AI agents to represent like trust, transparency, fairness, safety, etc.
Correct.
That will be one way that it's going to like bridge those AI agents together, and because again like it doesn't really matter. Like you and I don't really matter anymore to blockchain. I believe it's going to be our capital and all these new independent economic actors that we empower. And so if you're going to be a developer, I'd be really focusing on what it means to create AI agents, not for the sake of it, but to really be focusing on like what use cases you're actually solving, how do you make it easier for people to play with, as well like the interface. Because like when you have like tools like Nani.oo, who's an amazing actually Indian-based developer, who now lives in a place called Thailand. She's great. And so with Nani, you're able to like interact with a chatbot, and it's a smart wallet that allows you to buy and sell and trade crypto semantically. And so if that in the future is able to then allow you to deploy AI agents semantically, it's going to be able to manage crypto across different chains semantically. It's a pretty amazing use case, because the day that I can just use a single wallet, a single interface to manage all my crypto across any number of chains, right? I do for bridging, for staking, for NFTs, for Soulbound Tokens, for DAO governance, right? That's going to be a huge place to be in. I think that we're getting close to unification. So focus on unification, focus on AI agents, right? Focus on AI agent swarms. I also recommend looking at swarms.world. Swarms.world is an amazing framework for deploying AI agents, and they already have amazing use cases out there. You can just go download right now, Python-based use cases. And what else? Yeah, keep developing and keep building. But as well, if you're developing and building, try to like find out good commercial models. Try to research those, because a lot of great ideas can't make any money. Not that you can't right now, but it just means they don't make any money in the first pot. So go find great developers, go find great founders, go find great ideas, and then go spend a lot of money and time just training, deploying, testing, throwing it out. Reach out to me. Love to chat to you. Love to chat to anybody. So yeah, that's what we're focusing on. If I was a developer right now, I'd be focused on AI agents and the unification of blockchain.
Amazing. Got it. So developers over there. So advice is let's focus on AI agents, and how can you make it with respect to inter AI agent, like agent to agent communication, and just find the proper commercial model out of it. Amazing advice, Joseph.
Blockchains will pay so much time for you, so much money for your time, right? If you're able to like not deploy like 1 or 2 AI agents on their chain, but like 1 million or 10 million, wow, you're gonna be their best friend.
Right.
You get grants. You get grants easier, and also apply for amazing grants. Like Arbitrum has the AI Trailblazers grant of $1 million. I'd be going through as many grants as you can because again, blockchains know and realize that AI agents are the path to success for activity
Mhm.
on chain, and activity on chain increases token price. So
Right.
go do that.
Correct. Absolutely correct. So got your advice very perfectly. So
Pleasure.
yeah, we have passed almost our 15 minutes, right? So we have some time.
Yeah.
So I'll take one more question and then we'll try to wrap up. So the question is simple. Like what is your again generic advice for new developers which is entering in the ecosystem and who are trying to because what in India specifically, I don't know about the globe, but here, what is creating thought process is blockchain dead, or is it worth to invest more time or more money into the blockchain space instead of simply going towards AI or any other cybersecurity or something like that stream? And what will be the opportunities as a developer in ecosystem as well in future? So these kind of questions literally hits developers to get in before getting into the ecosystem. So, what's your thought process towards this? Like, what do you believe? Is this blockchain going to be a long term, like literally a long term tech? It is not a simply, it's like a boom sort of thing. It's in a very early stage, or it will get mature gradually. What's your thought process on this? Yeah.
Yeah, like I think how it's used right now will probably get dated at some point. Like how blockchain was used early on as well. Like a lot of the early use cases of the blockchain was token issuance and like you could make smart contracts really rudimentary before Ethereum, but it would take you like 500 hours and a lot of off-chain calls, etc. And like making new wallets and spinning up new addresses, right? And but it was possible back then. But then that way became redundant, and I think that like the same way where you had like ERC20s and the boom of like your ICOs, that was like a really cool technical like solution. But then it created like new technical opportunities after that, and then it became redundant. So like I think that blockchain goes through these filter motions where there will be times where the way we work today will become redundant at some point in the future. And I think they're already seeing that now, even with traditional tech, where like if you're a programmer, you can do a lot better by using an AI generating programming tool to check your code generation, to review your code, audit your code, etc. And I think that like as long as you're a developer that's staying ahead of the curve, like you're not trying to stick with the old ways of how things are done, like maybe you're on Solidity, but then you're not just relying on rollups, like your translation rollups, right, where you're like translating on Aurora, but you're actually now like learning about other programming languages too. I think that if I was a developer, a new developer, I'd be learning about exactly different languages that are out there in the system, understanding what their affordances are too. Like some of them, everything from like what's on ICP, all the way through to what's like on EVM chains, through to what's on like Near. I would be considering exactly like why are they being used in the first place. Just doing some research around that. I'd also like when it comes to investing too, because if you're a developer, you're probably investing some money over time. And when I was in Bangalore for India Blockchain Week, and I had a great time there, like a lot of people were asking around like what tokens we should be investing into, and I think that like I don't want to get, and obviously I never give out financial advice around these things ever, but what I would say is, and this is some amazing advice I got from Tom Preston Werner, who's the founder of GitHub, when I met him in San Francisco, and I asked about how he invested into companies, right, and his thesis and what he builds. And he says, build and invest into the vision of the future you want to live into. So if you really believe in AI agents, right, then put money into the compute assets, right? You can put money into your AI protocols on chain. I think like that's, if I was a new developer, really take a second, philosophically sit down with yourself, and ask yourself the question of what is the vision of the future that I want to live into, and then equally what can I build and invest into that goes towards that vision. And that's the way I would take that. But in terms of being like a brand new developer, like invest time into education over money every single time. Join communities, apply for a lot of grants, fail a lot, and as well, like you can do most of your learning now without having to do a degree. However, a degree helps in a lot of cases. So I think that if you have the time, the energy, and you have the passion, go out there, find a few cool friends, do a few projects together, fail them, do them again, keep trying to win and succeed. But like, we're always early because the future is always so big. So like even now people say like, oh Joe, you got into Bitcoin back in 2012, and I'm like, yeah. And I was late. I know people who bought Bitcoin like $1, or not $1, like maybe $10 or $15 or whatever. Right? Like, and
Right.
I felt like I was late back then.
Right.
12 years on now. You're never late. You're always early. It's just about grabbing opportunity and finding cool people to do cool things with, and also like again building to that future and that vision of the future you want to live in.
Amazing, amazing, amazing. Great advice. So, yeah, it's completely makes sense. Just if you believe in the tech, just go ahead and just
Yeah,
in the future.
exactly.
You just envision the before uh, building anything. You want that, create a great vision, and just move toward that. You have to keep running because that's how life works. Whenever you say like I'll get things in quickly, that's never happen. You have to put hard work into it. Then only you'll get it.
Oh yeah.
Hard work is very important.
NFT days over, okay, when you can stop making money out of thin air, right? Okay, like I say, actually one of the funniest things about crypto, where all these like super
Hmm.
unintelligent. There's a lot of intelligent people, but also a lot of unintelligent people who made so much money on anything that they're good investors.
Yeah.
No, they invest, they saw the opportunity, got in there, and
Right.
most of the people are probably broke again, unfortunately,
Right.
because they didn't invest enough time to education, or you just thought that was enough. So like invest time in education. That's the most important thing. You are the value, not the token. You're the value.
Correct, true. We are the values. Just remember this, guys. So yeah, so I think Joseph, it was a great talk and great advice from you. So we would
Thank
love
you.
to engage more conversations like this in future. But thank you so much for your valuable time, and it was a great time spent. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, always feel free to reach out. I love the Indian community when it comes to blockchain. Like as well, like me, the last thing I want to say is go to all the dev houses, all the hacker houses. Like there are so many out there,
Yes.
especially in Bangalore. Go enjoy them. They're really fun and like just love it. And also come to India Blockchain Week, an amazing event. I probably will be there this year as well. And
So
I'll see
yeah,
you soon.
yeah, just catch up then. I stay in Bangalore itself, right? So let's catch up
Let's do
sometime.
it.
Whenever you came into Bangalore, just text me. We'll be around, right?
No, that's what actually. Okay, I'm so
Yeah.
excited.
Excited. So see you soon then. Bye.
Pleasure. See you soon, mate.
Bye bye.